It's in the line at Walgreens drive-through.
Getting ready?
Did I take your spot? You even get your real spot.
Senior. I'm just kidding.
Hey, what?
We're live. Okay, Matt, kick us off.
My name is Matt Marshall. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the December Curriculum Committee meeting. I am the committee chair. I'd like to go around and have everybody introduce themselves, beginning with
Diane Potter.
Megan Carlson.
Tony Beat.
Teresa Garrett.
Angela Hardy, Director of Curriculum. We have a guest. Do you want her to be able to introduce herself?
Sure, go ahead.
My name is Joanne O'Brien. I live on 15 Lincoln Avenue in Gardner, here in Gardner. And former educator of 25 years in English language arts, all levels, careers and accounting on the high school level in New Jersey.
Welcome.
And you're here because you're interested, right?
I'm very interested.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so today, so last month we got to have a guest, Mr. Thomas, come in and speak to us about the teaching and learning side of special services, specifically our specialized programs that are being housed at Helen Thompson. This month, we're back to a little bit of nitty gritty, where we're going to review policy and start talking about the budget just a little bit and the curriculum cycle. And then next month, we bring in the instructional coaches. They come in every January and kind of provide us a mid-year review of what they're doing, what their engagement rate is, and kind of what their study of their impact. We have to keep it a little open, but you can make it ajar. So kind of going back and forth between having guests and doing the paperwork side of the curriculum meeting. So as you can see here, I think we have 8. We have 8 policies here to review. We're not the last stop. So we review these because they're the I policies and 1G policy related to instruction. And then you're able to make changes through discussion and agreements, not as formal as the full board meeting. And then they'll go to policy committee. And then from there, they'll make it eventually to the board. So it doesn't, even though we review the policies here, it still goes to policy. It's just that you spend more time in the instruction side of things. So we try to start instruction related policies here. And as you know, policies are under review they go under review every 4 or 5 years. And so that's why most of these policies are coming up now. So you'll see when they were adopted last, or we missed the cycle a little bit because of our COVID times. So we're trying to make sure we're all caught up. So these are all as they were when the agenda was sent out. So I haven't made any revisions since the agenda was sent out. So we'll just go through one at a time. Okay. So the first one is the school day policy. Much of this is defined at the state level, how much time we need to be in school, and then interpreted to our local policy. There are very few edits that I'm suggesting in this one. As you can see in the first paragraph, I just reorganized a phrase to make the sentence, for me, feel like it made more sense. So it's MSAD. Terry, should I show these on the screen?
You can.
I will do that. Just because we have people. Oh, how do I do that?
Do you want to follow this or do you want to log in via Zoom?
Did that invite work if I click on the invite?
It does.
Okay. Let me just move this to a drive so that I can get to the invite. Sorry. Take a look at that while I do this. And then let me open it.
Is that a phrase for each level? Does that mean for each grade level or?
That's a great question, and we should bring that up. In my mind, it's for each grade span. So maybe that's like elementary middle and high school. Do you see how, and grade and pre-K, see how the
Yeah.
bottom it lines up?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, that's but you're reading the first paragraph before you're reading the rest of it.
Oh, yeah, so it does say level all the way
Yeah.
Through there.
Terry, should my computer be on mute because you have the big one on?
That would be good.
Okay,
Are you logged into Zoom?
I'm almost there.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, now I'm in a waiting room
Okay. Now you're in.
and then I'll share my screen. Got it. Maybe I will share my. Oh, got it. Figured it out. Thanks, folks. Hang on. I had this all queued up too. Okay. Now I scroll.
Looks great.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. Okay, so Tony has a good question. So as you can see in the second sentence, I tried to reword it. It's the board's intent to provide for each level in the student body maximum instructional time within the instructional day. I flipped it to the end of that sentence because the focus of this sentence is to provide maximum instructional time within the instructional day. And now we may want to change that for each grade span.
I mean, it is actually laid out below, and I had seen that, I just hadn't connected that. I mean, grade span would work.
Or could we just end it?
What can you just
It's
say
intent-
for each grade?
Yeah, or
Zero
just,
level.
could we just say the intent
12.
is to provide maximum instructional time within the instructional day, period?
Yes.
And
Yeah, why
then
not?
later it
Yeah.
organizes it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the lower part kind of explains for each grade level, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I see it now.
Okay, and then it does define instructional day, which is defined in statute. And then it also, then as you can see, what we do is then clarify how that's organized by level. The high school, that means 4 teaching periods of 80 minutes and a total of 963 instructional hours. Those instructional hours are the same at middle school and elementary school, but the organization of the day is slightly different. And that's what's organized through policy. The only change on the rest of this is letter C. Instead of just for grades kindergarten and higher, I specifically spelled out through grade 5 because that's what our elementary schools are. And then under legal reference, that's changed. So I took out 6.01 and added in where the school day is referenced in chapter 125.
So I have a quick question. I remember a couple of years ago, we did over at the gym at the high school, we did not a retreat, but an exercise of things that we could improve on within the
Yes.
district. And I recall, we specifically talked about the 4 teaching periods at 80 minutes in length. Potentially looking at that to see if that was really 80 minutes being effective or decreasing it and adding more periods.
Right, so
Throughout the day.
students still
Where
get.
did we land on that?
So it was a 50-50 split. And in our other buildings, or specifically at the secondary level, that would be at the middle school, the challenge they have is that they have an O-day, B-day schedule also, but they run it 6 or 7 blocks of like 48 minutes apiece. And they say they never have enough time to actually get really into anything deeply. And so it's hard. You could do 70 minutes, but then you have a weird 40-minute block that sits out there.
Right.
So that's sort of at the administrative level of trying to figure out how to get the minutes squared away with the requirements that we have in terms of content and subject. It'll be interesting to see from these listening sessions if anything comes up around use of time. in terms of like broadly thinking about schooling and preparing our students for the future. And college classes tend to be longer.
Mhm.
So for like the upperclassmen, maybe an 80-minute schedule works well. For underclassmen, maybe it's harder. I don't know, but I'd be really curious to see how those listening sessions, like what themes are drawn from that. They're in session. There's another one tonight. And I don't know the results yet because they're gonna take all of that and
So they're looking at that, that's one.
well, they're
thing.
looking at, the questions are really broad about like, what is the school and what do you value about learning, teaching and learning and schooling in the community? And then when you think about the future, where do you want our graduates to be and how do we best get there? And so they'll be able to kind of dig through that data to see what kind of themes exist.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Because I would think anything under 60 minutes, I mean, how can a teacher even, like,
Yeah.
your class is settling in for, say, 5 to 8 minutes. And then I wouldn't think you'd be able to get much done. That was like when kindergarten was half a day. You never got anything done.
Yeah, I know kindergarten being a full day feels like so normal and natural now, but it did used to be half day and you know, you work with what you have, but
I mean, if 80 minutes is just that sweet spot, then that's great, but I don't know, I mean, would 60 work? I don't know,
For middle school.
just something to think about.
Yeah, and I know like the middle school is always in a scheduling revision process, trying to figure out what's the best fit for an adolescent student body and all the needs that we have. So they'll always sort of be in iteration, which is why it's sort of saying here, it's 5 hours and 30 minutes divided equitably across the day generally.
Does the middle school have like, I mean, I'm thinking my grandson over at Halldale, you know, red days and blue days, or
Yes.
something where you take 3 subjects one day or something?
So that's more the high school model here. The middle school does have like O day, B day, orange day, black day, but they, the only difference, they have a regular schedule every day except for like allied arts, and that's every other day.
Mhm.
And then in the high school, then you have an O day schedule and a B day schedule, and they're unique to each other. So it's like a gradual step.
Uh-huh.
I think this looks good, Angela.
Okay, any other comments or feedback for ID school day?
Let me just ask a question. In the parent portal, do parents have access to the curriculum for the school year for a particular subject that their child may be taking?
Depends on how you define curriculum. We have to stay on topic, so when we get to a curriculum one, you're welcome to ask questions about curriculum. We're required by law to stay on the agenda that it has in a public meeting like this. Okay, but when we come to curriculum, ask the same question. Okay, the next one is ILA, student assessment. So also not too many changes here. When this was adopted last in 2017, we were in the midst of a transition. So this policy before 2017 was very long. It was like 3 pages long because there was such a thing called a local assessment system, and there were a lot of rules set by the Maine Department of Education on how that would look. And then it was put to a halt because of implementation challenges across the state. And like literally there was like a stop sign that was sort of sent out to the schools, like, stop doing this, it's not working right. It's not working as intended. And so then there were some revisions to that. And this district in 2017 decided to maintain the language local assessment system. It's perfectly fine. But student assessment is what we need to reference it. We can add local assessment system if we want to. So I put a strike through just to keep it a clean one title policy. But as you read through the policy, consider your thoughts on that. So then I tried to kind of clarify this around assessment systems. So if there are people that have history in education, they don't tie it in with that initiative, but instead are just thinking like, this is a policy that defines what assessment means in this district. So in red, I'll scroll down. Other people can see it. I just clarified the board recognizes that Maine law requires each school administrative unit to use multiple assessment methods to measure student achievement. And then took out the assessment system language and considered that multiple methods include. And then that stays the same because we haven't changed our stance on that. It includes coordinated collection of assessments. And then to all these different levels. In other words, students shouldn't be only assessed by taking an end of unit exam at every level, at end of every unit. They can include things such as formative or smaller measures, writing samples, end of unit assessments, presentations, projects, all the different varied approaches to demonstrating your learning. And that's what this is really saying, is that we're not going to take a one-size-fits-all approach, but that there are multiple ways in which students can demonstrate learning. So that second paragraph sort of clarifies that there's that, which is even further clarified in your mastery and grading policy, which isn't under review today. But then it says, well, why do we use assessment? So that helps people understand that it's not just to give a student a grade, but that we use these different approaches to assessment to understand students more broadly, to see if there's patterns that exist to inform our instruction and our curriculum over time. So what are we learning when we do a universal screener 3 times a year, every year, over the years? And we look at the cohort going up, and we also look at the grade level over time with different cohorts. Is there a pattern that emerges? Do we notice that they're consistently strong in listening comprehension and consistently weak in writing, for example? Then we would say, oh, if that's the case, the curriculum needs to adjust. What we teach and when we teach it, therefore, needs to adjust so that our students are more prepared across the years to meet the expected needs or the expectations that we have set for us. Also, it kind of looks at programming. So beyond like social studies, we can look even broader and we can say, what does our intervention system look like? Are students growing in the intervention system? Are students growing in the acceleration system, our REACH program? And then that also helps us see, is there a need for professional development? If we're consistently challenged in an area, maybe we as a staff need to learn some new strategies or understand the research differently. And that's professional development. We always provide the state enrichment data, our achievement data that's required. And then obviously informing parents of student progress. And that's like through our report cards and our progress reports and our state of the school reports and all that stuff. So that's really what this policy is about, is just making sure that it's not a one size fits all. And then the only other addition is here, it said the superintendent will be responsible for implementing the assessment system. The reality is the director of curriculum is equally responsible. So and the sample policy said and or designee. So I asked Pat and we just added director of curriculum. Whomever is in that position would definitely be the person helping with us implement the assessment system. So that's this part of the policy. And then 4722A is not accurate now, and 6209 is under legal reference. So I just went through and revisited those. Section 6209. Any questions about this? Does something not make sense?
I'm wondering if it would make sense to add a cross-reference of the mastery and grading.
Yeah, you know what? I thought of that and then I forgot all about it. Yeah, we can do that.
Because it sounds like
They do.
they fit together.
Yep, mastery and grading policy. I can't remember what letters it is. It would be I something. I can look it up. Any other thoughts? These are not real controversial policies, but they're important.
Yeah.
Okay, IKAB, which is the report cards and progress reports. So we have, in the last couple of years, actually really gone over with a fine tooth comb the mastery and grading policy, because that's where our scales are set. Last spring, we even went in and changed does not meet at the elementary school to not yet met, and you approved that, and it went to policy and it went up. It was a long time ago. But so that one's like is recent and really good shape. This is sort of the overview policy of that, which is just ensuring that we have documentation that goes home to parents that helps them understand where students are at in their progress. And it sort of outlines that in the first paragraph. The second paragraph, the only thing I changed is I kind of surveyed our schools, and we don't routinely require parents to sign off on the report card and turn it in. And while it's not a bad practice, certainly, if it's in here as it will be reviewed and signed, getting 100% return rate on that is let's just be honest, it's nearly impossible. But we can guarantee that we're gonna make sure this information is accessible. We can give it to go home. If a parent calls and says they don't have it, we can reprint it. We can come up with strategies for making sure they get it.
You can certainly look through PowerSchool.
And then in the upper levels, they can access PowerSchool night and day, anytime they want, and see what's in there. And so, so the administration, when I asked, said they don't feel like it's absolutely necessary to have the report cards signed. But that we, in policy, you know, if there's a unique situation and a family and teacher decide that, you know, they might want to have an envelope that gets signed for whatever reason. That can be between the teacher and the family, or the principal and the family. And then the only other change is under the cross-reference, where I took out the words local assessment system, and then I referenced it to the graduation requirements. And the reason for that, because of the last paragraph, the principal will provide written notification to students and parents if the student may not qualify for a high school diploma. And so the qualifications for a high school diploma come from graduation requirements, that policy. Any questions?
After the word deficiency, is there an extra space with a comma?
Where do you see that?
Third paragraph, or is that right?
Maybe.
And if you look at
It does
intervention,
look
it's
kind of like a extra space.
something small, but
So I'll put a little note to see if there is. I can't tell
I
in the
figured Tony
PDF.
would catch
I
that
think
quick.
right after it is
It's the
16.
expert.
I did add the word or, sorry.
So would it be
I didn't say
helpful to add, like scheduling in a bullet of scheduling, like when they come out?
So here's why I'd like not to do that. So is when reviewing the sample policies, they don't say a specific time, we say regular intervals. Because at the elementary level, we have to do it by trimesters.
Okay.
At the middle school and high school level, we have to do it by quarters. So then we have to start getting into the nitty-gritty and the policy instead of just going based on practice. Like regular intervals at these levels is a practice thing, trimesters, quarters, semesters. The other thing is under progress reports. The policy in here, which is the progress reports may be issued at any time. Right now, we have a practice at the middle school of issuing progress reports between report cards. So they're at quarters, 8, 12 weeks. And then halfway at that point, they do progress reports, which is a lot of work, includes a lot of comments. When in reality, that was a practice that we defined prior to having PowerSchool be a living and breathing electronic access system where you can see grades at any point in time. So if we keep progress reports issued at any time, and especially when there's a deficiency need for remedial intervention or improvement, significant improvement, then we at the practice level can have some flexibility about defining, do we need documented progress reports every 4 to 6 weeks when we have an online system. I don't know, that's not a decision I wanna make at this moment, but I also am like, we might not, and that should be something that, more people are involved in making that decision. And so that's why I didn't change issue it at any time to issued in between report cards, because there's lots of ways of looking at progress, right? And then report cards being regular intervals rather than by trimester and quarter, because those are sort of practice things. See what I mean?
Yeah.
Trying to keep the policy at like, what's the goal? And then the practice at how do we implement the goal?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you don't have any, if it's part of the policy, you really have no wiggle room at all.
Right, and it will be in the handbooks, like the middle school and high school handbooks. They talk about report cards and progress all the time in more detail. Does that seem okay?
Yeah.
So we'll check on the space thing before it goes to policy. Okay, we're making progress here. IKFA, early graduation. So IKF is graduation requirements. We have changed graduation requirements, I think 4 times since I've been here, mostly because we had to modify community service hours based on COVID. So each time that the board approved that, we had to go into the policy, change the policy, and we modified what the total requirement was based on graduating year, based on access to community service hours because of COVID. So hopefully we're really familiar with the graduation requirements policy. This one is early graduation. So this policy last was checked in 2017. And I went through this pretty thoroughly. I went through it with the school counseling office and the high school administration as well, since they are the ones who have to implement the policy, and we agree that parties that involved in a policy should have review of a policy. And there's very few changes to this policy. This does not happen routinely. We don't have a lot of students graduating early, but every so often we do, okay? So that's why there's a policy. What do we do when that occurs? Let me catch up here. And so the first change is really in the second paragraph, which, I don't love putting certain dates in policies of certain classes unless it's a really unique circumstance like our COVID situation. So in here, this was passed in 2017, it is now 2022, and it's referencing 2020 school year. For students anticipating graduating under the policy at the end of 2021, so they're gone. Diploma requirements including demonstrated achievement of the graduation requirements for the standards-based diploma. We don't have we have a diploma, we don't necessarily call it a standards-based diploma, but we do have reference to ensuring standards are met to achieve our diploma. It was during the proficiency-based law era. So I just struck out that whole sentence because it doesn't seem relevant any longer.
Typically, what I see here it says sophomore.
Yeah, that's a good question, Matt. So typically, early graduation, students apply at the end of their sophomore year, beginning of their junior year, because you need a year's notice. And so that if they're graduating early, they're usually graduating 1 semester early or a whole year early, right? And so it says here in the third paragraph, before registering for the year in which early graduation is anticipated. So someone has to be really prepared to graduate early, right? The parent or guardian must notify the high school principal in writing that they'd like the student to complete his or her school requirements at the conclusion of that school year, of that upcoming school year. So, and then there's a form that we'll go over. And then you meet with the principal and, I found an error, and the school counselor. It says guidance counselor on paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. and it needs to say school counselor. Sorry, it's the new terminology.
Nice catch.
Yeah,
They'll appreciate that.
yeah. I met with school counselors today for 2 hours.
Oh, man, I sent an email to a guidance counselor and referred to guidance, so.
It's okay.
I did that wrong.
It's just, it's a shift. It's just a shift.
And is there any, like, has their job title changed or it's
Yeah,
just the wording?
Guidance counselor, they, in the field, was considered more of a reactive approach to supporting students, a very isolated role that, you know, you go to guidance, you take care of things in guidance, and there's not a ripple effect across the school. But now it's like, we're proactive, we plan, at the high school level, we plan lots of things to do with college and career preparation and events and stress reducing activities around testing time. And we think about the SEL piece, and we work across the building to help everyone be prepared to advise students towards college and career preparation while also working individually with students. So it's a shift in the role. They hold a familiar leadership type role now rather than a reference
Isolated.
point. Yeah.
Now, do they also encourage trade school? Because I
Yeah,
noticed that
that's
they
considered like
kind
part of college and career.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have a really, we have a solid student participation rate in our tech center work. Yeah, and across all, at students with differing aspirations can attend the trade school.
I think this looks good, Angela. The one question I have, and I might have missed it and it might be in here, but do they actually get to walk at some point?
Yeah, so let's find that.
Oh, yeah, I saw
I
that in
missed it.
here.
It's somewhere here.
They walk at the end of their,
Yes, where is
The
that?
year that they were approved?
Student will be awarded a high school diploma at the conclusion of the school year if all courses have been successfully completed, the student has met applicable graduation requirements, and if the student and parent guardian approve at that time.
I thought I saw some, I guess it was.
And then if it's referencing IKFA, if they've met their graduation requirements, they follow this plan, then they can participate. Right, so in the IKFA, it says when they can participate in graduation requirements, in graduation ceremonies, is when they've met their graduation requirements and there's some other feature that be good standing or something like that. And so that's why they cross-reference, so the student can march a year early if they've done this process which is also why it needs to be done in a year in advance, because right, there's all those things that happen in that senior year that this child would now need to be prepared for in order to actively participate in the graduation ceremony. There are some grade guidelines in here, as you saw. And then there is a change on the page 2. It's really more of an update. The language and kind of approach has changed. Under number 1, page 2, it said all courses had to be taken at the Gardner Area High School Day School program, which we don't call the Gardner Area High School a day school program anymore. I think the idea was to avoid adult ed as being the avenue to achieve early graduation. But the reality is, by saying that, it also means that the tech center might not be part of that. And so we didn't want to get trapped in like, you can only graduate early if all your classes are taken at Gardner Area High School and not taken at CATC. When junior year students can qualify to go to CATC, and if they can qualify and have met their graduation requirements, we should be able to enable that. So the school counseling office and I talked, and the way we thought about it was, you as a board adopt a program of studies every year. Those are the course pathways students have that can help them achieve graduation requirements. You also adopt the graduation requirements policy. So by the program of studies and the graduation requirements, students have multiple pathways to meet graduation. And if you're going to graduate early, you should have those exact same pathways, right?
Right.
So that's why we just reworded it as it must be part of the approved courses and courses don't have to be taken at the high school. They can be taken at the tech center. They're in the program of studies,
Can they,
as noted in the Gardner Area High School program of studies.
can they also like maybe have one class that is taken as one of the diploma classes for adult ed or not?
Adult ed can't be taken through this right now based on rules at the state as a pathway for this. They can be taken for other pathways, but not for early graduation pathway. They can take college classes that are approved through the program of studies. They can take AP courses, they can take CATC courses, anything that's already part of your pathways through approved program of studies, but adult ed is not part of your approved program of studies. It's like a secondary pathway in. And part of that is because of the way the state recognizes student graduates and student dropouts and what qualifies. Gets a little bit complicated.
One other thing I saw here in the last paragraph for the sake of consistency, and I know it'll probably get caught at policy anyway, is the his or her.
Oh, I've seen a couple. I was just waiting for.
Yeah, how did they get work in policy?
It frankly doesn't matter to me, but it's for the sake of consistency in our policies, and we ought to do it one way or the other.
Yep, so you're using they, them in policy?
There, should be there, actually. right
There, okay, so that will have to be adjusted before it goes to policy. I can make that. I'm just out of practice on that. The other thing is I also noticed in the last paragraph, delayed awarding of diplomas, there is another reference to guidance counselor, and I in the second to last sentence, and I changed that to school counselor just now.
And of course, the actual graduation application, the early graduate, there's a number of gender things in there that.
Okay, so we'll go over that in just a minute.
Andrea, when they take the college courses, is it just the University of Maine colleges that accept those? Because I know for my daughter, she had 9 and the college she went to wouldn't accept any of them.
Yeah, it depends on the institution. So they do a transcript analysis and they get to decide. So our students, I think, take courses through University of Maine, through Thomas College, through KVCC, like there's lots of options for them to take in college courses. I know like a lot of University of Maine schools will accept almost all of them, if not all of them. And I know some smaller colleges out of state will also accept many of them, or if not all of them. But then I know like Colby College doesn't accept almost any. So
Wow.
it depends on the college's practice and policy, and we don't have control over that. So we're just trying to offer opportunities for students in hopes that they can transfer those credits. Sometimes what they'll do is allow them to get into a higher level course, but not give them the credits for the prior course. So they still have to graduate with X number of credits, but they get to accelerate in their learning pathway because they really have passed that class already.
It's pretty cool.
So it depends on the institution. And I'm just learning a lot of this now too, because my own kid is going
Yeah,
through
because we
this,
were
so,
kind of bummed.
yeah, I'm like, ugh, I know.
But it did prepare her for college classes.
Yes, exactly. So there are benefits. The delayed awarding of diplomas, that is just, it's fun. It falls under early graduation because what it means is a student hasn't quite met all the graduation requirements, but for some very unique circumstance is prepared to go to college early. The college has accepted the student prior to earning a diploma from the high school. And there's a mutual agreement and plan set up that the first few courses, like usually in that first semester that are being taken, like college writing or something like that, will meet the requirements we have at graduation. And then once the student passes that first semester and the transcript has been produced, then we can check off the graduation requirements and issue the diploma. It is incredibly rare, but I do know it happens, but it's very, very rare. It's usually under very unique circumstances, which is why you do want to have it in policy. And so that's what that is. And I don't have any recommendations for changing it. I think it's an important piece for a very unique student.
Angela, just for the sake of time, We've got a few more to get through.
Yeah.
And is the curriculum review portion of the meeting, is that?
It's just an information.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll go, so IKFA, no changes except for they and
Yep.
there.
And there's a page before it that has it there.
Yes, yeah,
Policy, we'll find that as well.
yeah, and I'll
'cause
try to edit it before
We
it
have
goes out.
two very high,
Detail oriented.
yes, editors on that board.
IMBAA, alternatives to biological dissection, you've had this policy for a long time. The only requested change is to add guardian to anytime you say parent.
Yep.
Otherwise, the science department has reviewed it. There's no requested changes.
Just to be the editor, so like G has parents / guardians, the other
Have singular.
have singular,
That's an
yeah.
error, we'll fix
I
that.
don't know if you wanna.
Make them in alignment,
I don't know.
singular or plural. Got it.
If that's okay.
Any other questions? IMBB is very similar, exemption from required instruction. And again, it's not just an automatic pass, but there is a process. This just outlines the process. And I had no changes except for a clerical change on the second page under legal reference. Maine Department of Ed rules was written twice. I struck one of them. That's it.
Nice.
Process has worked for us. There's been, and it was also vetted through another department at the high school. And then the one that I just want to make sure we spend a little bit of time on, but it will really need to be reviewed at policy. And this is more just to get your input. Sorry, did you have one?
Well, I don't know, I didn't, there's something in here that references the parent's ability to be concerned about what their child.
That's under our policy on sensitive issues
Okay.
and our practice for, what's the name of the policy? It's right after it in the policy data bank
Okay.
that says this is how you proceed if you're concerned. And this is, and then it goes to a committee and it goes through the process and then it comes back
Okay.
to the board. So yes, that policy exists. Teacher preparation time. We have a committee, it's been meeting routinely based on the request of the board to go over teacher preparation times policy before negotiations. This will be gone over with a fine tooth comb. This is after many, 6, 8 meetings with representations from every building, teacher, and the association and administration. Without going through every single detail in this, because it will definitely go through policy, but I wanted to make sure you're part of this. And you may want to join the policy meeting on this one, it's up to you. The overwhelming request in terms of bringing this committee together was to ensure that what preparation time is more clearly defined. So that is now in paragraph 1 and 2. And it defines what is teacher preparation time, as in they get to direct how they use that preparation time and what constitutes that. And then when there is administrative directed preparation time, when that can be and what it can be for and kind of what it can't be for. So that's what the first 2 paragraphs are. The next section is a rewrite, essentially, almost a full rewrite, it's all in red, of preparation time. And it's being more inclusive or more explicit about the roles people play. So in the past, it just sort of said elementary teachers, secondary teachers. We've tried to very carefully clarify classroom and special education teachers have one kind of defined preparation time, but elementary specialists, or otherwise known as itinerant teachers, music, PE, art, they share buildings. And pre-kindergarten teachers, because they have students 4 days a week and prep time on the 5th day. they should have an equivalent amount of preparation time, but where that's allocated may be more flexible than it is for a classroom teacher. Classroom teacher gets the X number, 40 minutes daily, these
And they get
teachers.
it during their specials, right? Do they still get that?
Yeah, and then these are the specials teachers, so they need to get it at a kind of a different time when they're sharing too, but the minutes should be equitable. So we tried to define that really clearly. Duties is an issue, defined, and so we've come to an agreement. Actually, everyone at the table is in agreement that teachers can elementary teachers, the concern was at the elementary level, because secondary has always done duties, that we clarified that it's not in cases of emergency, but it's limited. So they can only have a lunchtime or recess duty up to 2 days a week at the most. And the other 3 days a week, that 30 minutes next to their 30-minute lunch period would remain, so they still get a 60-minute block there. And that it would be on an equitable rotating basis. So there's not one teacher that gets 2 and another teacher that gets none during that block. Okay, so that's more clearly defined. And then secondary actually remained the same, except for we added social workers and school counselors into it because they were kind of missing. They're in the contract, but they were sort of missing about how that looked. And we kind of looked at their schedules and what made the most sense. And then we defined administrative time, which is basically how they will deal with duties, and what administrative time might look like, and then dealing with when we have rain, what do we do for indoor recess, which was in the past policy, just written slightly differently. So that's in here. There's only one sentence. Let me see if it's still in here. I don't think it's in here anymore. No.
Is 400 minutes the right?
Yes, it's bi-weekly
It's
though.
bi-weekly, so,
It's an average of 200 minutes a week.
okay.
At the secondary level, but because we're O days and B days, sometimes it's like 175 and 225, somewhere around there.
That's why.
And then it flips the other way
Yeah.
the next 2 week period. So it can't say 200 minutes per week. It averages to 400 minutes per week, it's bi-weekly. And the elementary, based on this new approach, it would be, I think it's 235 minutes weekly. At a minimum. So it's 35 minutes more than the secondary, but they teach all the content areas. And what we realized is they walk the students to and from their specials. So the reality is there's 5 minutes 4 times a week that ends up taking away for that. So that's really like 210 minutes or 2 that they really have. So the secondary team felt like that was equitable.
Cool.
So any questions on that so far?
Do they still have the like grandparents reading program?
Some places do. We're just slowly getting back into all that because of COVID. The policy committee will need to go over this more detailed. Do you see some edits you'd like to make?
I had one question on paragraph 1, the last line. It just says, in the situation in which a substitute is available when a vacancy exists. There we go. We need to fill the role.
So how that would work?
What does that mean for prep? Yeah.
That would be like ed tech's covering for a PE teacher or the principal at Pittston Randolph who's been teaching PE when the person is sick. So there's an effort, and what we did actually is we worked with the whole team and said, what are the ways that could take shape? And we decided that shouldn't be in policy, it would be in a practice document, and we would create a document that says, here are some ways that we could support the implementation of this policy. But it shouldn't be written into policy because then it's like, you have to do it only this way, and our times change all the time. So it should be like, how can we support our schools in implementing this policy? Here's a document that can provide ways in which people have done that.
That helps having the example for me. And then the only other thing is that the last two sentences of paragraph 2 on that, I think that's just a dependent clause there. I think there's supposed to be a comma.
Thank you.
Is that right? Is
I
that?
don't know. In addition.
And
Yes, you're right. And then a lowercase letter.
then a lowercase.
Per week when students are scheduled to be with itinerant teachers, comma, lowercase, any time.
Right, that's
lunch
one,
duties.
yeah,
Right here.
sorry.
That should be a comma and then lowercase. Thank you for noticing it. Anything, any substantial? Okay, it's a big deal. Thank you. Good policy review. Can I switch gears?
Yep.
Okay, I want you to have this because it's been a long time since we've gone over the proposed curriculum review cycle. And now I'm trying really hard to get back into it. So I updated this document and I dated it for today's meeting since it's public viewing today.
Wow.
And oops, I don't even know where I put it. Right here. Okay, I'll try to be as succinct as possible. The purpose of this is to ensure that we have a routine review of our curriculum and that our curriculum becomes accessible, obviously, to teachers, but then the what and when we teach things to our public, to our families. We have lots of different ways in which we do that. On the MSAD11 curriculum website, we do have curriculum guides. Those were reviewed here, and those are really teacher documents. Those are like nitty gritty, all kinds of things about teaching. What I want to do is pull that out a little and have it be really accessible and understandable to families or community members. What does that look like? And so I've done a couple different ways. One, as I pulled out a lot of that information into what we learn by grade level, and that was shared at parent-teacher conferences, in some places in report cards. And so that hasn't been posted yet because we wanted to see how people reacted to it, and it was a positive reaction. So I'll get those posted. So that will be the what's expected by the end of each grade level document. And then kind of the scope and sequence of like the general scope and sequence of like almost like the units of study. There's pieces of that in that document, but I'm trying to take these guides and get them into like a parent-friendly, community-friendly document and get that posted. So that's part of the transparency piece. As you know, we always follow the main learning results. We don't deviate from the main learning results. So that's followed. And so this was our original plan, and then COVID hit and it all changed. So I just wanted to update you on the second page or the backside of that page. We kind of go through this. It feels like a long process, and it is. We go through kind of a 3-stage process with the 3rd stage lasting multiple years. So we bring a K-12 team together and kind of do an audit and make sure we understand where we're really at across the system and vertically. Historically, I've started to change that a little because what was happening is I had like 2 people in middle school and 2 people in high school and 4 people in elementary school representing that, which was great initially. But then when you had to get into the deep dive of planning, I really, based on our structure, realized I needed like an elementary team, a middle school, the whole middle school group in that content area, which is only like 6 teachers or 8 teachers if you're talking about science. And then the department at the high school with the vertical team kind of bridging it, right? Making sure everything flows vertically. But that deep dive planning work really needed to happen with every teacher as much as possible. So that's a revision here. So that's why you're going to see some things chunked out by grade span. And remember, there's only one of me, and I have to meet with every group. So I reorganized this so you can see that it still kind of flows from plan to learn and refine, which means we're trying out parts of what we think are going to work. And then if it works, we adjust, then we adjust, and that way we can fully implement for a few years, right? And then come back and do that cycle again, but maybe not as intensely if it's working really well, more intensely if it's not working really well. And so that's where you're gonna see sort of this ebb and flow across the years. Where you see like, I'm working with social studies middle school and science K-8 this year. We'll add the high school in next year, and then we'll get into the real learn and refine the following year. So it's a little bit longer of a process, but I think it's more inclusive of the staff. And they're the ones who have to implement the curriculum. So the more they're involved in the professional learning and the design and the decision-making and making the recommendations to you about the resources we're going to purchase and the way the curriculum is going to line up, the easier it will be for you to support because you know there's more people that have been involved in the process to begin with, and that there's more unified support behind it. So that's the rationale for this change.
Is this plan going to take into account the specific grades that have a little bit more significant learning loss because of COVID?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure how that's all gonna play out. But I mean, we're certainly pushing more resources into those grades right now. Like, this is more the big picture.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then I'm not gonna, this is just the how does this work? So you know the details are here. And then down here is something you just might wanna be aware of as we start to enter the budget season.
Yeah.
So the gray by year is just, those are kind of routine big ticket expenses I have that you've supported, and I just like to keep track of them. So, like our K-5, that, remember $20,000 for K-5 math, that's like 6 grade levels of math, 47 classrooms. And so really the price tag for that is actually pretty good. 47 classrooms, 900 students, right? That's a pretty good price tag.
Absolutely.
And so that's annually, and it's not just the like classroom instruction, it's also the online learning platform that provides some of that guided practice just when the teacher's not right there in front of the student. So it's actually pretty good. And then you invested in our ELA program, which got us up and running. And then this is just our annual consumables, like the journals and the workbooks and, the things that support, but not the meat and potatoes. You already invested in the meat and potatoes, and that's 7 years. So we're good for 7 years. And then as you can see, the darker ones are where I have, and I try to balance it out and I have a little bit more work to do, but where we know we need to invest to either because it's been a while since we've invested or we're noticing a challenge in that area. So like our most intensive intervention work in literacy needs a little investment this coming year, unless I can repurpose a grant, which I can't do yet, so I haven't asked you. And then you can see like at middle school, when does the science get reinvested? When does ELA get a reinvestment? Social studies is on a 6-year license right now, so they're not showing up on this. It's not that we don't invest in them, it's just their license. You already approved their license a couple of years ago. So high school has historically not invested a ton in like textbooks, but they have a really strong curriculum that is common by course that's constantly revisited and embedded. So I'm starting to meet with people to kind of update that over time.
You still do Latin?
Yeah, we have a really vibrant Latin program, actually.
Really?
Yep.
I was thinking the same thing.
So I
was
just,
thinking Mandarin maybe instead of Latin.
yeah, and I just kind of wanted to let you see that, make sure you saw that this was coming up. So when we get into the details of the budget, if you're like, well, why don't we have anything here for, I don't know what one, social studies? And that's like, well, that's coming in the next year. Like we have long-term planning so that you can ask those questions, but then I can refer to this and say it's coming up in this year. That's when that works. And it should line up pretty much to the curriculum review cycle as well. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And I just wanted you to have this so that as we enter the budget season and you start to see the details, you can see where it sits. Okay?
Good job.
Okay. Any other questions
Did your question get answered?
about
Just
curriculum?
in terms of trying to put together the curriculum in a parent-friendly,
Yeah.
friendly
Yeah.
way, so.
I think Angela actually mentioned that.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
pretty
The
much.
resources were there
answered
for.
So Joanne, you might wanna go to, on our MSAD11 website, under central office and schools, there's a link to MSAD11 curriculum. Some of it is teacher access, so it will, just because it's not that no one can't
We
see
had
it,
that
but
in
people don't wanna see
Power
it
School, we
probably.
had the whole thing laid
Yeah.
out and
But then that's where I'll also put the more parent-friendly, like shortened version. If anyone has questions, they can see anything,
We can
we're a
discuss
public
that
institution,
in
but
January.
but sometimes people don't wanna read through all the details, but they want a better sense of what's going on. So that's all where that's all gonna lay out. There's quite a bit of stuff on that website, so.
How do you assess soft skills? Like, I call them success skills.
We call them habits of work, and we have a scoring tool for that in the report cards. So we can meet and I can show you that. Yeah. Yeah, and they're separate from the academic achievement grades. Content and habits of work are separate. It's actually part of our mastering grading policy. Okay, so we started at 3:39 and we're ending at 4:39.
Good
Matt, are
job.
we-
Hey,
Are we
When are
good?
we gonna meet next?
Great question. The second Tuesday of January, which would be January
Good.
3:30. And that's where we will have the instructional coaches.
A fun one.
Yeah, it is. And it's usually only that. Sometimes we try to sneak in one little item if something's come up between now and then.
But they're so like energetic and they're so, like last year was so awesome.
Yeah.
They just had so much energy and positivity and
And it will lean a little more towards literacy than math because we only have one math coach and 3 literacy coaches this year. So just feel free to be prepared to ask her questions about math, but there's just one. Okay,
Great.
great. See you in January.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
Seems like